We're going through the process of a governmental shutdown, and we've received an awful lot of calls to our office. We did a virtual forum last night. We did a meeting in Manchester, and we're going to continue to do virtual forums, et cetera, so that we keep people apprised of what's going on. And a lot of the calls that we get at our office, I think, are calls that are easily answered. So you should have received, either you got it or it's on a seat next to you, these commonly asked questions that we receive. They're important questions for sure. And in fact, this morning we just held a press conference as well with the entire delegation, House delegation, to go over the impact of loss of health care benefits and what's at the core of this resistance to the Trump administration and the shutdown. First of all, let me make something perfectly clear, that Trump controls the White House, the House of Representatives, and the United States Senate. And if they want to open government or if they want to shut it down, they have the power to do that. And some will say, well, wait a minute, doesn't it take 60 votes to do that in the Senate? And the short answer is yes, provided they do something called follow the cloture vote. So you might ask, well, what is a cloture vote? That's a vote, it's a rule of the United States Senate that they can evoke that requires 60 votes. Or they can, by simple majority, say that that rule is not in effect and the majority will prevail. So it would take 51 votes. So the hard truth is they have the power and the authority to do it. And the further truth is that a negotiation was worked out and reached bipartisanly by Democrats and Republicans, led by Rosa DeLauro from our own state. And Trump said, no, you don't need to negotiate with them. I would prefer a shutdown that I can blame on the Democrats. And I'm going to blame it also on immigration, because that's what really gets people worked up. And I'm going to claim that all these immigrants are receiving benefits that they're not. But if I can convince the American people and stoke the fear that this is about immigrants, then perhaps the American people will believe me. Mr. President, the American people are a lot more smarter than you give them credit for. And they can read and know what the law is. And no less than everybody. And we just came from Access Care, where the head of the private sector said, and listen, it is total misinformation. Whether it's when they say that illegal immigrants receive Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid, or the Affordable Care Act, the law is specific and clear. They cannot and do not. But does that aggravate people who may not know about the law, may not have read it? Not that people are saying, oh yeah, I sit down and read the Constitution on a regular basis. That just simply doesn't happen. So they trust in their elected officials And they've trusted what the president was saying was true. But it is not. And unfortunately, even faced with that information that this is not true, people still believe that that's the case. So we have been going around to debunk that and have asked, please, if you know anyone who's an illegal immigrant that's receiving one of these checks, could you bring them forward to us and show us? And, well, believe it or not, so far no one's come forward. What a shock. So I do think that that's important, because what we want to do is end the government shutdown as soon as possible. And as I said, Rosa DeLauro has taken the lead. They had a bipartisan agreement reached, and they pulled the plug on it. And the latest agreement is still before the Republicans to make a decision that says, let's keep government open for the next month through a continuing resolution while we continue to negotiate what was in the bill that you agreed to. So what's in that bill? And what is it that people are fighting about? They're fighting about the loss of 15 million people being kicked off of health insurance, and also fighting about the fact that they not only people who get kicked off entirely, but those that will see their premiums rise because of that to outlandish prices. And for what reason? So that we can give tax cuts to billionaires, to people who don't need the money. And not only that, they haven't asked for it either. I have to imagine that a number of them are probably quite embarrassed when they learn that they're taking food out of children's mouths or disabled or veterans' mouths and getting rid of health insurance for individuals so that they can get a tax cut. We're a better nation than that. And we will prove that and continue to do so. And so hopefully they negotiate in good faith. We were back this week. They decided they weren't going to come in at the president's direction and not negotiate. And then first he said he wasn't going to meet with Jeffries and Schumer, the Speaker and Senate Majority Leader. And then he called them in. And as Jeffries said, he remained silent throughout because his mind was already made up. He said, there'll be no negotiations. We're keeping this as it is. And immediately went out and said the reason that they were doing this and that they weren't going to negotiate on health care is because it's just a giveaway to illegal immigrants who, hopefully you get my message loud and clear today, that they do not and cannot receive insurance benefits. They cannot and do not receive Social Security benefits. Although they do pay into that system. But unless you're a citizen of the United States, you cannot receive that money. That is factual. And don't take my word for it. Take CNN, take the New York Times, take a number of the Republicans who are coming forward now. And hopefully a few more of them have the nerve to stand up to the president. Thus far they haven't. And say, listen, this is a common sense, straightforward, practical thing to do. So, but in the immediacy of the shutdown, the reason we put this out here is that here are some of the questions, and I'm just going to read through these quickly because you may have them and this may answer them. How will your operations be impacted? Can I still contact you for assistance with a federal agency, meaning contact our office? The answer is yes, and please do. because inevitably there will be things that come open, even the things that remain open, because they've already been diminished in terms of their employees, AKA 7,000 Social Security employees already laid off, and others they're conditioning and trying to get rid of as well. More of that later. But our office is open and will continue to work and open any federal case that you have. And I'm looking around, there she is. And this young lady over here in the red hair is probably a national authority outside of Betty on Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. So whenever you have a question or you find it too difficult to get through, call our office. That's what we're here for. That's what we want to do and help. So we will remain open. Will I continue to receive Social Security benefits? Yes. As you know, Social Security has never missed a payment. Not in the history of the program. And when I say never missed a payment, I'm not talking about just pension payments. I'm talking about spousal. I'm talking about widows. I'm talking about dependent children and disability. And we don't have to go back to 1929 or 1935. You only have to go back as far as 2008, 2009, and the Great Recession, when you saw 401ks become 101ks. Social Security never missed a payment. And part of what's going on, and a number of you have heard me mention this several times, what's going on now is a bold attempt by this administration to privatize Social Security. Why? Good question, right? Why would you want to privatize Social Security? I'll tell you why. Elon Musk, in one of his rare moments of truth, said, hey, listen, Trump kept on saying, we're not going to touch Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security, right? You all remember that, right? Oh, no, that's sacrosanct. I'm not going to touch that, etc. And then when the press asked Elon Musk, well, where are you going to find this $2 trillion that Trump's asking you to cut? He said, well, 3 agencies amount to 70% of the federal budget. Those agencies are National Defense, Medicare and Medicaid, and Social Security. Of the 3, 2 have trust funds. Medicare and Medicaid have a small trust fund, around $200 billion, small by government standards. And Social Security, of course, which has, how much money did he ask them to find? Oh yeah, $2 trillion. Social Security has $2.7 trillion of your dollars. Now let me repeat that. $2.7 trillion of your dollars. Because I'm emphasizing this because I want to dispel another myth. One, that people say, there's no Social Security trust fund. Oh, yes, there is. And it's sound and solid, and could be more so if government does the right thing. But in the meantime, they are trying to privatize Social Security because they want that $2.7 trillion of your money. Now I say your money. And how do you verify that, Congressman? Well, first of all, you all can read, and on your paycheck you saw the stub. It said FICA, right? What does FICA stand for? federal insurance. What would that insurance be? Oh, Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, but federal insurance contribution. Whose? Yours. So everyone go, well, wait a minute, Congressman. Come on, you know that the business pays half of that. You know, they pay half of that those costs up front. I said, yes, that's absolutely true. Well, then you're wrong then. I said, well, do they get reimbursed from that? They go, well, do they? Yes, they do. They get fully reimbursed by the government. Now, let me ask you something. If they get fully reimbursed by the government, who's the government? You. It's called We the People for a reason. That is your money. So, in essence, the point I'm trying to make here is that it's not just a portion of your money, it's all of your money as a taxpayer in the United States, both that you've contributed to directly and that businesses have contributed a portion but were reimbursed entirely by you. So Social Security is entirely paid for by you. It's a separate fund. It also has nothing to do with the national debt. Why? It's a separate fund that you've put into. So why would Elon Musk and Donald Trump be so concerned about that fund? I can give you 2.7 trillion reasons why. And the attempts to privatize it are ongoing. What do I mean by that? It's been tried before by Ronald Reagan, by both Bushes, and it's been stopped successfully because the American people stood up and said, wait a minute, Democrats, Republicans, and unaffiliates all know the benefits of Social Security. And so they've stood up and said, no, we do not want to privatize this. And they say, well, you know, Social Security is very inefficient. It is the largest insurance program in the country. It covers over 300 million Americans. There's no insurance company, and we live in an insurance capital of the world, that even comes remotely close to that. And it's administered for next to nothing. What's the average administrative costs of an insurance company? Now, the Aetna is one of the lowest at 11%, but on average, it goes from 16 to 26%. Administrative costs to run a program that all of them combined don't come close to the 300 million people that Social Security takes care of. What's Social Security's administrative budget? In its heyday, it was 1.5%. It should be, in my humble estimation, at 2%. Why? Because 10,000 baby boomers a day become eligible for Social Security, and what this administration is doing is shrinking and lowering Social Security. They've already got rid of 7,000 employees. The phone systems are in desperate need of repair. Human contact oftentimes doesn't exist or is delayed. And they're now trying to say, oh, well, we're modernizing the program because we're bringing in AI. And you're all supposed to go, oh, wonderful, we're all going to be saved now. They're bringing in AI. How many of you have had difficulty getting through to Social Security or a governmental agency when you call? Raise your hand. Yeah, so you get it. And so now, at a time with 10,000 baby boomers a day becoming eligible and calling and saying, hey, what about this? And there are attempts as well to close regional offices. So you can't go there and visit. And so their answer is, well, people in the future are not going to need that. They can just make, I love this, digital contact. So, you know, I have a hard time using my cell phone. So I don't want to, I'm not trying to, and listen, there are advantages to that, and there's, for people that are fluent and understand, yeah, that's okay. But I'm old-fashioned and still of the belief that it's not a bad idea to have a human being on the other end of a phone or directly who you can talk to. I don't care how much the technology improves, it's still not a human being. You can't pause and say, what about this? They respond, point number one, point number two, point number three. If you don't have that, call this number. If that number doesn't work, call this department. And it's all by voice, and you're there, no, I just want to talk to a human being. If you had to say, I'm just trying to find the key to the bathroom, they couldn't answer you. They'd say, no, I'm sorry, that's not within our form. If you call this number or that, again, you've been through this. Point being, you're always going to need to have, I don't care how digitally advanced we are, you're always going to need to have a human being on the other end of the line to assist and aid the people who just have common sense questions that they need to have answered that aren't necessarily programmed into a computer. Just like I can hand out this list and it goes through questions people might have, but it doesn't have the specific question that you might have or that you might need clarification on or someone to explain. Is that asking too much to do of your government? Can you find, and so Social Security is currently operating with less than 1% administrative costs. No other governmental agency, no private sector agency operates at this, and they're saying it's ineffective. Well, I can see why it would be ineffective if the phone service is broken, if the computer service is outdated, if you're closing regional offices and laying off people. How is it going to be more effective? So what's their goal? Their goal is to say, well, it was well intended in its day, but it no longer works. We've got a better idea. Oh, you do? What might that be? Well, we're not going to touch Social Security. We're not going to do anything to it, but we think that there's better ways to do this. Have you heard of AI? Yeah, everybody has, but what does that mean? And please explain it to us. In fact, you may have seen I got a little riled up when we asked Mr. Musk to come before the Social Security Committee and tell us about all this fraud, abuse, and waste that they have found. You heard about that, right? They found a funny thing. They never came before the committee. And yet they keep repeating that there's all the fraud and abuse that's going on in an agency that has the lowest administrative costs of any governmental agency and of any private sector agency by a wide margin. Don't let them buffalo you or fool you with this. That's what we're here. That's why Betty Marafino comes down to Washington all the time to lobby on your behalf and on behalf of retirees and people that are flatly, right out eligible for Social Security, which is all American citizens. So over 330 million people. The good news is those checks will keep coming as they have, and Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid will continue to send your checks unless this gets worse. I hope it doesn't. We all want to settle this thing, and hopefully they'll come to their senses next week when we're hopefully back in Washington and voting. But whether it's Medicare, whether it's the Husky plan, or the Affordable Care Act, will they be disrupted? The short answer is no. If you find yourself in that situation, contact our office, right? And you all have the number there, but if you don't, 860-278-8888, a lot of crazy eights there, but nonetheless, it's an easy thing to remember. Will the Postal Service still be open? Yes. Will passports and visas still be issued? Yes. Consular services, passport services, visa services are continued. However, if the shutdown is prolonged, passport and visa issuance could be delayed, again, by lack of people being there who they continue to furlough. How will the federal workforce be impacted? During the government shutdown, many federal workers are furloughed. All federal workers, regardless of furlough status, will go without pay for the duration of the shutdown, including an estimated 10,000 people in the state of Connecticut. The Government Employee Fair Treatment Act, signed into law in 2019, guarantees that furloughed government employees receive back pay once the process is complete. Let us hope. The longest shutdown was around 36 days. Let us hope that the president comes to his senses and understands that this is a real issue. Will the again, SNAP program be impacted? No, but after a month, again, because of internal problems, we'll have to check to make sure that it stays intact. And travel, well, the air traffic controllers, Transportation Security Administration will continue to work, and again, we need that more than ever, with all the recent incidents that have taken place. So this little card gives you all that information. The most important thing is to call our office. You should have gotten one of these as well, which lays out our constituent services that we provide. And you should have got, for every town we go in and visit, we happen to be in West Hartford. What we're doing is, because people will often say, well, what are you doing? What have you actually done in our communities? And this gives you a thumbnail sketch of what's been going on and what is some of the things that we, the Connecticut delegation, have delivered for the community. So all of that is here. And then the important issue, again, that Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut is leading the country nationally on, is this negotiations with the administration over opening government and correcting a crisis before it blows up. What's that crisis? It has to do with them taking away health care from 16 million Americans. And also for those that are fortunate to remain in the Affordable Care Act, their premiums skyrocketing and unable to pay for, which puts people in the god-awful situation of having to try to decide between whether they provide health care or food, or are going to pay their rent or pay for heating or cooling their home with access health care. And again, it was rather important that they, the private sector, initiated it again and said, by the way, no immigrant receives any benefit from this. This is just another misdirection, another lie and deceit that says that money is going to pay for health insurance. Does that mean that they still won't be treated by a hospital? No, it's called uncompensated care, which of course, Ronald Reagan even signed off on that way back when, years ago. That is the law of the land. And so what happens is they will take in individuals and that who are sick or need help them. But there's fewer of them, and then people, healthy people, that say, well, I'm going to have to take a risk because I can't afford this insurance, no longer have insurance, and the pool of people who have insurance becomes just the sick, which of course raises the cost of insurance overall for everyone. So yes, to your point, they don't have health care, but they will be treated. Nobody is turned away from a hospital, if it, God forbid, that's the right thing to do, period. But it does place a lot of a burden on hospitals and also the staffs that they have that diminish. And as this nurse said, she's very concerned about the stress and the workload and uncompensated care and what that means. Yes, ma'am, and then we'll go to you, sir.
So I agree that healthcare is crucial, but a bigger issue is not getting enough coverage is your last point. And there's no point in agreeing to any kind of budget if Trump is going to continue his precision and impoundment. So I want to know what kind of backbone the Democratic leadership has not to reopen the government, not to agree to anything until there are ironclad guardrails that even the MAGA Supreme Court can't overturn.
Well, yeah, from your lips to God's ears. But I think actions speak louder than words, and I think the Democrats being there, calling upon them, look, we want to see a solution to the problem that exists, but we don't want to replace one crisis with the other. And I think there is an opportunity for this to happen. Why do I say that? As I said at the outset, they had already worked on a compromise between the leadership of the House and Senate, led by our own Rosa DeLauro, that Trump pulled the plug on. Now, to your point, can we guarantee what Trump will do? God bless you if you can. But I couldn't say in all honesty that we can guarantee that. And have the Republicans done what he has said? Unfortunately, yes, even though many of them have said, no, this is wrong and we're with you. Let's hope, to your point, that the Republicans develop a little bit of spine and speak up on behalf of the people they take an oath of office to serve and support. But I can understand your skepticism as to whether or not that will actually unfold. But you can't stop from trying, and you can't stop putting it forward. And I assure you, Democrats will stay the course. I can only speak for myself, but I was just with the whole delegation that answered that very same question and said, we will all be together, because this is not a question of Democrats or Republicans. This is a question of right and wrong and human decency. Everybody knows what the issue is. And at the end of the day, because of what? Why would we not do this? Oh, those billionaires really do need that tax cut. Don't you know this is all going to trickle down to them? What's wrong with you? Come on. Obviously, I'm being overly cynical about it, but as Shakespeare would say, more truth is said in jest than not sometimes. And yes, sir.
Uncompensated health care. Okay, so that happens, and I believe in that.
Right.
I'm definitely in favor of that. Somewhere the money comes from, for the doctors and the nurses. Where does that money ultimately come from?
Where does the money ultimately come from?
The hospital get compensated.
Where did they get their uncompensated care from? The government.
So it's really getting paid by the government. Whether you call it, whatever program you call it, it's not a program that you're naming, but it's still coming out of the government.
Yes.
Also, I disagree with you, it's not morality, it's not a question of morality anymore. Trump has made it totally not about morality, and the people who are following him seem to have no sense of morality. So, and that goes to the next thing, so you have an agreement to meet again, and keep it going, which I think is a good idea. But I don't see anything in Trump's itinerary, well, I don't know what the word is, sometimes I lose words, but I don't see anything that Trump is going to, come around on.
Well, first of all, to your point.
So much. I've never seen such, they might talk about it in private, that they agree with you, or they agree on that, but when it comes down to votes, they're not giving anything. And that's what,
I think the reality is, has Donald Trump ever worried his whole life about not being able to feed his family, not being able to pay bills? Of course not. So there isn't this empathetic concern on one hand. On the other hand, he's the president of the United States, and by virtue of that, you have a responsibility to the whole country. But to your point in skepticism, again, he has demonstrated, I like to read David Brooks. Have you heard of David Brooks, the conservative columnist? He says, I think he has the best explanation of Trump of anyone I've read. He calls him a narcissistic nihilist. Now, I live in East Hartford, and my favorite place in East Hartford to go eat is Augie and Ray's. You may have heard that. Don't say it reflects it in your gut, but at any rate, nobody at Augie and Ray's talks about narcissistic nihilism, I can tell you that. But what he meant is this all-encompassing ego and the idea of grasping as much power as he possibly can. And he wields this power and has put the fear of God in the Republicans. So even decent, there are many decent, honest, hardworking, caring Republicans, but thus far they haven't stood up to him. Sooner or later, the constituents, and that's what will change everything, the people will speak out and say, wait a minute, this is wrong. Now, that's why Trump tries to always shift responsibility. He's the master of distraction. He doesn't want this to be over basic health care. He wants this to be over illegal immigration, because he knows that Americans are upset about that. And if he can link the two, he doesn't have to get 50%. He doesn't have, all he has to do is get enough emotion so that he feels that his party will remain loyal to him. Otherwise, they will pay a price. The only one that can make them pay a bigger price are the people themselves. And so that's what it's going to take. I usually tell my story about George Washington. Betty's heard me tell it a million times, but because it's the same thing. Everyone said, well, how did we ultimately become a republic? Well, in 1775, actually 250 years ago, the Continental Army was just outside of Boston. They were ragtagged, morale was low. The then Continental Congress was meeting. And at that time, the Continental Congress was comprised of more Tories. All right, now you know who the Tories were. Tories were pro-king, pro-crown. And then this guy wrote a little book called Common Sense. It's actually not even, Thomas Paine, it's not even a book, it's a 46-page pamphlet. And what Washington remarked is it was the most widely read document other than the Bible in the 13 colonies. And when he became president, he brought Thomas Paine to his office and credited him with the production of that pamphlet, meaning arousing the people who told their elected representatives that they wanted not to reconcile with the king, they wanted their independence. And Washington credited Thomas Paine, and Thomas Paine said, it wasn't me, it was the people who read that and believed it and spoke to their representative. And it changed a majority of Tory voters to voting for independence. So the reason that we start off, we the people, in our Constitution is because that still remains the case. And a disturbing thought, but nonetheless true, in the last presidential election, more people did not vote than voted for both presidential candidates combined. When we are in a democracy and the people give up and say we're not going to vote or we're not going to, and usually the attitude is, well, a pox on both their houses. Democrats and Republicans, I'm fed up with all the gibberish. Why don't you all just get together and do the right thing for the American people? That's a sentiment that everybody can unite behind, etc. But it doesn't happen if you don't vote. Yes, ma'am.
So that's the perfect segue to the question I was going to ask.
All right.
I'm a veterans advocate. You were standing right behind me when I spoke on June 14th at the Capitol. And I have a very big mouth, and I have a really hard time keeping it shut. What would you advise for people who want to do something other than scream at the television?
I know that feeling. That's no good.
But you're expressing what so many Americans feel in terms of the frustration. And usually people follow that up with say, well, we know our whole delegation, both senators and all 5 members of Congress, we know where you are, but how are we going to impact these other people? Number one, you can call and write them. Number two, you all know people in other states and in other, the more that the American citizens, just like it happened with common sense, the more we use our common sense to spread this notion, to stand up to this president. The other thing people say, well, and this is true too, they say, well, how do you account for Trump's credibility? I said, okay, Trump's at the all-time lowest of any president. Who's lower than him? The media that supposedly reports on him. So the media now has even said, hey, listen, you know, the popular thing to do is not report on what's actually going on, but report on the fights, report on the clashing, report on all of this stuff, not necessarily what has to get done. Now I'm stereotyping there, but from a public approval standpoint, Trump is above the media. That's why he continues to attack them, because he knows that they're lower than he is. And now I ask you the last one, and who's lower than the media? The United States Congress, exactly. because people, again, are so frustrated and we're only 4 seats away from taking a majority in the House of Representatives. And obviously that's our focus, because then we can actually constitutionally have a check on the president. And when I say that will happen in the midterms, people go, I can't wait that long. And you say, well, then you have to get active, but 2 years election cycles is actually not a long period of time. It is when you're frustrated and you see someone doing the things that Trump does, but it will be here sooner than we think, provided people stay the course and stay as concerned and as vocal. So don't worry about your big mouth. It's important, and we're going to need it. Yes, ma'am. I'll get to everybody.
This is a little bit off the track, but has anyone ever done a study between the administrative costs of Medicare and the administrative costs of Medicaid, or not Medicaid, or Medicare Advantage? Because I have relatives who have Advantage plans who are suddenly looking at it and it's not covering what they expected. And you see all these TV advertisements for Medicare Advantage. I mean, those companies are getting paid by the government for services that are constantly being cut as opposed to governmental Medicare. Has anyone ever done a study that can be put out there and just said, this is what happens when it's privatized? Where does the profit go? And that applies to Social Security. I mean, it's an argument.
Well, I don't think it applies to Social Security, but I understand the argument. Have there been studies? There's been a lot of different studies at the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages of the system. Are there solutions that exist out there? Yes, but they need to be enacted into law. And that was part of the Affordable Care Act, was not only to provide insurance, but make the corrections that need to be made over time. And like everything else in the private sector, there are some good guys and bad guys too. And you want to make sure the easiest thing overall would be Medicare for all, right? And that would clearly be the easiest thing, but then to try to put that into effect becomes a very cumbersome process. So it's ultimately, it will get there at some point, but I would be less than honest if I said to you, I thought that would happen, given how close the margins are. Yes.
Medicare administrative costs, I'm sorry, boss. Medicare administrative costs, just as your comparison to your Social Security, 2%.
Right.
2%.
Compared to-
Don't tell me those private companies are running at 2% administrative costs.
Absolutely. And they're pouring money into advertising.
Correct.
Betty, and then we'll get to everybody.
Could you talk a little bit about Mike Johnson? And does he have that much of a stranglehold on all the Republicans, or do you see some moving away from him and his?
Well, I don't think Donald Trump has saved his speakership a couple of times already. And unfortunately, he's a puppet of Trump. And also, the Republicans are not as concerned about Johnson as they are about Trump. But do I see Republicans moving away from him? Yes, I do. But what will make them move away? Democrats standing up and, saying, hey, you guys are wrong about? No, it'll be their constituents that say, hey, wait a minute. I'm losing my benefits, or I'm part of the Affordable Care Act and my premiums are going to double or triple. And again, based on income and where you are. So it impacts whether you're a Democrat, Republican, unaffiliated, it impacts everyone. And so that's what we believe will be the turning point, is that people getting, it shouldn't have to get to that point, but it may. Yeah, who was the next gentleman? And then we'll go to you, sir, in the back.
A couple of days ago, we saw a Guardian story about the president's mental state. The president seems to be giving the same speeches over and over again. Are you aware of any conversations among your colleagues about invoking the 20th Amendment concerning the president's mental state?
Well, there's always conversation of that, and you may remember that when we were in the majority, in the House of Representatives, we twice impeached the president. When we were in the majority, and it didn't go through. But I think there will be continued stories. Do I think an impeachment procedure is going to happen with the Republican-controlled Congress? No. So I do think, and there are many colleagues on our side who will be introducing those kind of amendments. Will they be taken up? No. That's unfortunately the truth. Yes, sir.
So I got kind of two questions.
Yep.
First of all, I truly feel like as much as you say there's a plan, you don't really have a plan for this. Because even though this Medicare stuff is going on, there's still ICE basically regulating neighborhood across the country, taking people, taking U.S. citizens, shooting people. And I haven't heard a word from you about this. In fact, you've given leniency to the Republicans by even talking about their problems with immigration. I mean, you should be focusing on ICE and problems with Congress and your party funded. They're better funded.
So you think that I made it on saying nothing? The very thing you're talking about, when it disgracefully happened in Newington and Southington and East Hartford, we spoke out, and because of what I said, became part of Trump's hit list. So you may not have heard or read about that, but it wasn't for lack of speaking out or standing up.
But speaking isn't doing anything right now.
Well, so in a democracy, when you say you're not doing anything, you do know what it takes to pass a bill or change the law, right? You do know that we're in the minority, right?
All of this.
Right.
The Democrats in your party and in versus you have allowed us to get to this point. What are you going to do to get the Democrats out? To force them to actually get us out of this?
I don't think you fundamentally understand.
To actually give people proper social safety nets that are being ripped away. Give health care to people. Because most of we're talking about this health care stuff, trans people are getting their health care ripped away across the
The reason we're talking about health care and not everything in general is because that's what this shutdown is about. That's what's at stake here, because we're going through a crisis currently. And while you may not feel that Democrats are speaking out, they are every day and on the floor. Are they being heard? Is the press carrying it? Obviously, you didn't hear about what happened in Newington.
Actually, I followed it very closely.
So you didn't think I spoke out. You didn't think I spoke out?
I know what.
Why don't you let him answer your question and not continue to talk over him? If you want an honest answer and question answered, listen to the congressman. Talk for the
What
sake
is
of
your
talking.
plan then for all of this? That is my question. What is your plan to get the Democrats to actually dig us out of this hole? That is my question.
It's called an election, and it's called the midterm elections in 2026, and it's being in the majority so that you can vote and pass a bill and change regulations and be a check on Donald Trump. That's the way our system works. I mean, I like the system, but that's the way that it works.
Well, what if when you have the majority, you're not able to still get things
So we should just give up?
No, what are you going to do to combat this? What are you going to do to get the Democrats?
I just told you what we were going to do, and you said, yeah, but that may not happen.
Yeah, because we've seen that.
Okay, so you're convinced it's not going to happen. So you have to then decide to do what you're going to do as an individual. And if you don't believe it's going to happen, and if you don't believe that the person you're sending to Washington will do it, then you should run for office, ask someone else to run for office, do whatever you think will make the change. But it doesn't sound like you have a solution either, other than to say, hey, what are you going to do about it?
Well, I mean, you're elected to represent.
We are demonstrating what we're going to do about it. We're standing up to the president. We're calling upon them to fix this crisis that he created. And we're saying, we're not voting for the budget until you do that. Now, if you think there's a better way, by all means, you should put that out there.
General, what if Democrats break the line like they did before the previous budget bill? That's the reason why it passed in the House, because Democrats.
Well, listen, I don't think you're going to receive any answer from me that you'll be satisfied with. So why don't we let other people ask a question?
I mean, one thing I think the Democrats could do is coordinate a general strike with the unions and several organizations across the nation to shut down the economy. Like, that is a very simple, I mean, that's what's happening in Europe right now when it works in Europe, it's going to work in America.
They could.
The Democrats actually need to engage in that actual general strike. I've not heard a single Democrat present that as a solution, even though that is an actual effective material action that can be taken to hurt the bottom line of the Republicans and to break down the power. And now another thing I want to ask is fundamentally going off of what he said. The bigger question is that the Republicans don't care about the rule of law. A week ago, Stephen Miller passed the National Security Directive that is instructing law enforcement agencies from local to the federal level to stop police people on anti-capitalist, anti-American, anti-patriotic speech. And then a single Democrat has spoken up against that. I have not seen that. The only one, Ro Khanna, I think that's he's the one that actually spoke against that. News media, liberal media is carrying that. Democrats aren't talking about that when they are literally putting out a directive for thought policing. The Republicans are playing on a completely separate field here where they don't care about the rule of law. There is no more procedure. The liberal democracy guardrails completely fell apart. That's what happened in Weimar Germany. That's when we had the Nazi regime, because the liberal democracy completely fell apart in the face of fascism, and that is what's happening here right now. Several days ago, ICE agents rappelled from a Black Hawk helicopter into a building that was 95% black. They took people, naked women and children, shoving them into vans, zip tying them hand together. This is clearly a party that does not care about procedure, that does not care about law, that does not care about bipartisanship. And I understand that you have to uphold civility politics, but we are far beyond the space for civility politics. We can't keep doing when they go low, we go higher. We need to go even lower than that now, because that's actually going to save this democracy. Like, this is a life and death situation here. You're talking about the midterms it's not going to be a midterms at this rate when the Republican states and governors across the entire nation are changing congressional districts in order to engaging in a high-level gerrymandering across the entire country. We're 10 months into this regime. Look at how everything is falling apart, and we're supposed to wait for the midterms under the assumption that the midterms are going to happen. There's clearly not a democratic nation anymore. We're not even going to have a presidential election, let alone in 2028. Could Trump and Jeffries and Schumer sat down with the president? He put out a Trump 2028 hat. What did they say about it? They just laughed at him and kept talking with him like there was nothing wrong. They're completely normalizing Trump running for a third term. It is so clear that the Republicans are on a completely different playing field, and the Democrats aren't ready to actually take that on. There is no legitimate, real, direct opposition here. We cannot keep relying on the guardrails of liberal democracy if they're not being followed. The rule of law only works so long as every party agrees to follow the rule of law. And we can't rely on the Supreme Court either, because the Supreme Court keeps handing Trump win after win after win. I mean, Clarence Thomas is in the pockets of Harlan Crow and the Heritage Foundation. Most of them are in the pockets of the Heritage Foundation, and they clearly do not want this to be a democratic nation. This is a fascist state, and it's not. And if the Democrats don't even have the bravery to condemn the genocide that's happening in Gaza, even after the UN, the ICC, and the ICJ have declared that it's undoubtedly a genocide, if the Democratic Party cannot condemn that, how can we expect them to actually stand up against fascism in our own country? what they're getting at is that there is no actual direct action. You keep talking and saying, yeah, wait for 2026, but we're
So
not gonna get
when
to
you say
2026 at this
direct
rate.
action,
Direct action, yeah.
yeah, right, so what is that direct action?
I mean, one option is a general strike.
All right,
Shut down
so
the
you're
economy.
saying
That's
a
one
general
option. There are
strike?
other options, but-
You're saying a general strike, correct?
Yeah,
You're saying a general
a
strike.
general strike. Democrats coordinating
Good
with unions across the
idea.
nation.
Good idea. So a general strike coordinated by Democrats with,
With unions, with community organizations, shut down the economy.
so you believe that the unions will all work with Democrats to create a strike across the nation to shut down the country?
We should. Yeah.
Well, whether we
Where are
should.
you gonna go?
whether
Where are you
we-
gonna go,
Whether
honey?
whether we should or not
What country are
is
you gonna go to?
a matter of debate in a democracy. But doesn't mean it's a bad idea. But how do you, in terms of actionable, how do you pull it off? It sounds good, right? Doesn't sound, it sounds like a good idea. Now, let's take that phrase you used, action. What action is required beyond speaking about it? And I think therein, it's not that you're not passionate and not right about what you're saying. It's then the term you used, how is it then actionable within our system becomes a little more difficult unless it happens spontaneously, et cetera. But to coordinate something like that would be very
It's being
difficult.
done in Europe right now. Italy has a general strike right now.
Well,
And it's not gonna come up spontaneously, exactly. There needs to be a
I
coordination. What's supposed to be the opposition
I
party.
don't disagree with you. What I'm saying is that the action that you're calling for, where does that start?
It starts with our elected officials doing their job.
Well, so if you're an elected official and you believe you are doing your job, then what's the action you want me to take?
So then it's our fault that our country is under fascist regime right now?
Pardon?
Constituents? If you think you're doing the right thing,
Right?
and is it our job then to figure it out and take direct action? You are meant to be ready.
Yeah, I'm saying this because you are in a position of power. You and your colleagues in Congress are in a position of power to be able to do this. The Democrats, even though they do not have power in government right now, still have a significant influence
We're not in the
and they're
position,
connected to
we're
capital
not
across
in
the
a position
nation.
of power to enact legislation. We are in a position of power because we're elected to represent people.
You still have
in our
broad
district.
influence though.
Pardon?
You still have broad influence in order to engage. And yeah, I'm not saying that I know this is a very complicated idea. Like the general strike is not something that can come about in a day, but and that's just one possible solution. That's something that's going to need coordination and actual implementation and an actual process to get to. But it's better than what's being done now, which is effectively nothing. I mean, they keep stepping over and over, and every single line that is drawn in the sand, the Republicans are stepping over it like nothing. We keep pretending like the rule of law matters, and it doesn't anymore.
Well,
There is no democracy here anymore.
that's because there are people who are not standing up, who are in control of the democracy.
Yeah, so, but the question is, what are you doing about that? Because it, like, just to sit here and be like,
Trying
they're
to
not
take
listening,
back
so,
the
like, we can't-
House of Representatives where we're 4 seats away
So the 12
from
people
being
that
back
disappeared
in the
from-
position to do something.
But again, that's based on the presumption that we're even going to have an actual fair midterm election.
When
But
have,
you're
when,
voting on this very thing
when
that they clearly showing that they don't care about.
when haven't
having
we
an
had an
election.
election?
What's that?
When haven't we had an election?
When have we had fascism in this country?
The election is how the democracy operates.
And if there is no democracy, there is no election.
If there's
And
no
we do not have
election, there's
democracy.
no democracy also.
Why is the government shut down?
Why is the government shut down right now? Because of
Did
Trump.
not get what he wanted, and so he's strong-held and our government is not shut down? What makes you think that he is not going to continue to do whatever he wants if there's nobody to stand up to him?
I remember back in
What
February,
makes you think so?
said that
Even if
Trump
you're
disobeyed some
standing
people,
up
he
to
said
him,
court-martial.
and he has the majority, the way the system works is the majority is in control. And as I said at the beginning, they control the White House, the House, and the Senate. What changes that? Elections.
Yes.
It may not happen soon enough for you,
For all
and
of
you
us.
may not feel that
Our
Democrats are
safeguard
resisting
education
enough,
in this country.
but that is the
Can one person speak at a
Your
time,
time. If
please?
you want an answer, listen to him.
I'm just trying to explain it as it is.
They don't want an explanation.
I do. I do.
Well, then please listen to him.
Betty, go
Trying to
ahead.
answer
Let's
it.
get back on.
I really appreciate your passion, I think it's great, but we the people, that's how we begin this. And on October 18th, 2 weeks from tomorrow, is National King's Day, and there's going to be.
No King's Day.
No King's Day. And
Slip of the tongue.
it will be at the Capitol at noon time, I believe, and everybody should be out there. It's going on across the country, and that's where we need to get out there. That influences congresspeople, senators, and
I think if there's no action.
But that's where you need to go to,
Well, if I
That-
could just add, at the last one, there were Congress people there, Congressman Larson was there, Senator Blumenthal, there were lots of other elected
Sure, I
officials
spoke at
over
one
there,
of those.
and lots of people, and we need thousands of people to be there on October 18th at the state capitol. Show support.
thank you, Benny, yes.
So, I really appreciate your comments and your passion and everything, but now that we're talking about the elections, what is Connecticut's stand, your stand on the gerrymandering, and how or if, are we going to do anything about the gerrymandering suggestion?
Well, as you're probably aware, that's done state by state. And so I think we have to support the efforts of Jasmine Crockett and people in Texas and people where it's happening. And governors in other states have already said, well, if you're going to do that kind of gerrymandering, then we're going to gerrymander our states. Long term, I don't know if that's the best solution, but it is one way to fight fire with fire, etc. But ultimately, as is the case in California, the people will decide. And that's how a democracy works. And the more that convincing that people can be, and as Betty pointed out, I do think that there's ample opportunity to rally the public, because that's what's going to change in the final analysis. It's frustrating when you say, well, we can't wait to an election, but you're within the structure that you're operating under. That's how the system works.
I'd like
And
to follow up with that. So if we do the gerrymandering, then basically our election system is going to completely fall apart.
well, that depends. That's not a, it's a constructive thought, but yes, there's a possibility of that.
And then we have to come up with some other system, because it's not going to be democracy anymore.
Well, some would argue that it's not a democracy now.
Right.
And there are others, but just like it was the case in 1775, it was very unclear whether it would be a democracy back then. And there wouldn't be reconciliation. In this case with the king, but how many of our fellow Americans want to reconcile with Trump? How many believe that he's doing the right thing? How many voted for him to be president of the United States? That, like it or not, that's our system. And he was able to win.
I think that's questionable, but anyway.
I agree with you on
Yes.
that.
I just want to say, I understand how you feel. It's very scary. I've been watching the news and YouTube continually, and I had to shut it off just like 9/11. I was born 8 years after World War II, and I was not born in this country. My parents fled communism across the border to Italy. And I just want to tell you, I was born during the war, and I went through the Vietnam War. My brother went to Vietnam. And I remember that time. I remember the civil rights and how, you know, it was a really radical time in our country. And everybody has to get together as much as you're fighting for our country, you know, for our health care. And we really have to unite as a nation. I know that's harder to do.
No,
like to
but
petition.
I often get asked, isn't this the worst time in the history of the country? And I have to answer, as bad as it is, no. Was it as bad as the Civil War? Was it as bad as the First World War? Look at what just happened between the election of President Kennedy and within a 10-year span, at a time when we also had incredible movements going on in the country all at the same time. Civil rights, environmental rights, women's rights, all were coming forward at the same time. And then to have a war that became a national protest. And during that time, if you said today, the President of the United States, the leading civil rights leader, and a senator who would have been President of the United States, while all these other movements, cities were actually burning, transpired. But what prevailed? The democracy, because more people got engaged, more people got involved. Why? Because of the movements that were going on at the time, but they did it, as frustrating as it was back then, through the process. And the democracy withstood that. So this is another test for our democracy. And can we, during this time, not lose confidence in what has held the nation together and stand up and reject the obvious wrong-headed policies of Donald Trump and what he's attempting to do? And admittedly, that's not an easy task, and we're in a different time where people communicate and get information. And it's not always factual. Why we spent at the last several meetings just denouncing the fact that immigrants are the cause of every problem for this nation. Quite the contrary. We're a nation of immigrants. And that's how we became the greatest nation, by tapping into and relying on the genius of Americans. And why, when they come into car washes, whether it's Southington or Newington, or whether they snatch an individual from my hometown of East Hartford who aided our troops in Afghanistan and did so, there's never been a point in history where people relied on black masks and guns to enforce the Constitution. They're there by executive order, and what they do is outright wrong. And people are speaking out and standing up to it. But it will take an election to change that. And I know people don't want to hear that either, but that's the truth. Yes?
I hear very clearly that you disagree with a lot of the things that the Trump administration is doing right now, the kidnapping people, the strong arming. And I hear you saying that the election and working with the system is one way of combating this. Can you share just like one thing you're doing right now to work against it? Like anything? To work against the Trump administration's takeover of this government?
First of all, opposing his wrong-headed budget. You want me to give you the whole list, or just?
I did come to learn.
Well, standing up to him on just about every major policy that he's put forward that we disagree with, and have an alternative budget, an alternative policy, alternative immigration proposals. You know, immigration needs to be addressed, but we have to have very specific proposals. It's not enough just to criticize the president and say that he's wrong. If you've heard me speak anywhere, I said Democrats have got to say that here's what will happen in the first 100 days that we regain control of the Congress. We will not only fix, but expand Social Security and Medicare. We will make sure that we pass immigration that allows people to peacefully come to this nation and have a path forward while protecting our borders at the same time. Our own Chris Murphy introduced legislation that passed bipartisanly in the Senate, and then Trump told the House not to take it up, and it wasn't. So I think you could go down the list, including healthcare and everything that needs to be done there to make sure that the Affordable Care Act stays in effect and provides the individuals with the help that they need to sustain themselves, to make sure that we have a foreign policy that makes sense, especially as we're dealing with on several different fronts. So many different situations around the globe. The kitchen table discussions, though, are probably the most important in terms of the cost of living and the wrong-headed decisions on tariffs and where that is taking us and why that's raising the cost of living for people, which continues to be the Americans' number one concern. It's tough to get people motivated in another area if you can't feed your family, if you don't have a roof over your head, if you can't afford to heat or cool your home or put gas in your cars. Those are the things that we're working on. And we're going to be bringing Hakeem Jeffries here, who I believe will be the next Speaker of the House. And he'll lay those out as well. But I can understand why people are frustrated, because they hear people complaining about Trump or saying these things, but they don't see a plan. And I think the phrase that was used before, meaning, what actions will you take? And it's further frustrating if you're in the minority and you can't even get your bill raised, let alone get action on it.
I guess just like a follow-up then, something I noticed a lot in recent, like the last decade of politics, is a lot of spurred by Trump and all of his promises to, in the first 10 days, I'll do all of this evil stuff. In the first 30 days, I'll slash this. And in your response to me, you said that the Democrats are now kind of mimicking that, saying in the first 100 days of having a majority, we'll pass all of this. And what politics has begun to feel like for me is that a pendulum, a violent pendulum. The Republicans have power and they do a bunch of stuff that the Democrats don't like. So the Democrats win in a midterm or in a full election year, and they swing back and snap back a bunch of stuff, and that angers the Republicans. And then they get power and it snaps back and you lose we lose rights, we lose healthcare, we lose social services. And we can't live like that. It's not sustainable for this country because it means that no progress is being made in any system because we're just arguing about the status of it. We're not looking to critique or improve or grow any of our systems for our citizens. And as a child care worker and as somebody who thinks deeply about what the future will look like for the people that come after me, I see no progress being made. And I just, like, I guess that's just me voicing a fear, but like, we need to come up with more sustainable ways of governing rather than just saying, well, when we get power, we'll take it all back, because when they get power back.
Well, I'm not saying take it all back. I'm saying produce programs that will work well into the future. And what I'm saying is that wasn't said in the last presidential election. To your point, though, Trump said that. He told you that the Ukraine war would be over in the first 24 hours that he was president. He's made a list of things. Why did he say that? He said it because he wanted to demonstrate to the American people that he was going to do something, that he was the agent of change. My point is that Democrats didn't. I'm a big champion of Social Security. That's my focus in Congress. What did the Democrats say in the last election about Social Security? You're right. And not all Democrats, but if you're not saying it from the top down, in other words, Trump has a mega microphone. Everybody has a microphone. And some have stronger voices than others. But he had a big microphone, and he used it in a way that he was able to convince the American people that he was the change that they needed. And that's why I'm saying the Democrats have to demonstrate that we don't even only disagree with him and are going to change the things that he's done, but here's our plan. Here's our vision for the future. And oh, by the way, we're not just going to talk about it. We're going to actually do it in the first 100 days. That's a little bit different than just flipping it back and forth from where it is, so I get your point. I'll get back to you, but let some of the other people speak here. Yes, sir.
I really appreciate what I'm hearing you say. Part of what I'm hearing you say is that each of us has a place where we can be active. You're active within the system of Congress, and each of us needs to be more active than we are as a group. Some of us are very active, I'm hearing, but some of us need to be very active. But for a moment, I wanted to ask you to be a little self-reflective for your, not just for yourself, but for your Democratic colleagues. How comfortable are you all in using more language like describing others who do fascist actions, who are authoritarians? I mean, part of it's the language that is used. And I know that there's a delicate balance that has to be created. You can't call names, you can't call people names, that doesn't get you anywhere. But how comfortable are you and your colleagues becoming with using language that goes there, but doesn't personally insult anybody? Because that doesn't get you.
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and I think the short answer is this administration creates such rage. For example, to your point, when this tragedy took place in Newington, and I spoke and I said, look, we are not Germany. We do not operate like the SS and the Gestapo. There is no need for people to wear masks and be armed to strip people away. As I came in this door today, and then the guy said that he wouldn't be allowed to speak. I said, what do you mean you won't be allowed to speak? He said, well, the questions I have to ask you are why you're against our police forces and why you're, why you're going after these ICE agents. I said to him, I totally respect police forces. Those ICE agencies are not a police force. Hugo Benettieri, who's in the back of the room here, is a retired police officer who works for us and talks about the structure of police and how it's supposed to work. So, but because I said it, someone said to me, don't you regret that you referred to ICE as Gestapo and SS? No, not the way that they carried out what they did to those women. And I said, and I will continue to speak out because I think that that's wrong. One might suggest could have been a better way for you to say it. Well, there's always a better way to say things. But that's what came to me in the moment. And the point was, the question you asked, have you seen any of these PBS specials by, what's his name, Steves, who does the thing on the rise of fascism and how it happens? I think they're excellent. And I wish every American watched them, because you can see how these things start off. And in this case, whether it was Mussolini or Hitler or whatever the case may be, where it started and when it was not questioned. And I loved what you had to say is that we all have an individual responsibility in this, in a democracy. And I agree with that too. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, so
Can I get
the conversation from everyone and
water?
giving me a lot to think about. Water. But I'm really worried about the midterms. I'm really worried that the Democrats won't win. I'm worried about the gerrymandering. I'm also worried about the Democratic messaging. And I just wanted to share with you a thought that I have, which is just that I think this is the time for the Democrats to take a page from a playbook of the past from one of our most popular Democratic presidents, FDR, who got a huge coalition behind him and won majorities for decades afterwards for the Democratic Party, and to get behind an economic bill of rights for the American people.
Well, what I like to say is agreeing with you that we need a new deal. And to reiterate what a lot of these rights over the years that Democrats have stood for. And we take great pride in the fact that we say, we being Democrats, we're the most diversified Democratic body ever assembled in the history of the world. And that's a pretty big statement, and it happens to be true. But what comes with that is this. So we have about 11 separate caucuses within the Democratic caucus. We have the Congressional Black Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, the Blue Dogs, the New Dems, the Environmental Caucus, the Women's Caucus. I could go on. And the problem in the past has been everyone has their point of view that they believe is more important than the other. And so oftentimes, Democrats, as you can imagine, from different states across the country, can have different slants on how they look at things and how they... So probably the most incredible Democrat to emerge in a long time is Hakeem Jeffries, because he's the leader and will be the first black speaker in the history of the country. But he will do so by bringing all those diverse groups together and to come up with a message that works, that's going to impact the people across our country so that we're unified to take back the House of Representatives, and hopefully the Senate too. But I can't speak for the Senate. I can only speak for the House and its leadership, and that's why I'm going to bring Hakeem to the district, so that I think that the more that people get to hear, because this is all fair criticism, and this is why you hold town hearings and meetings, so that the public gets to, I'm your representative. So, and whether you like, dislike, or whatever, that's not important. My job is to listen to what you have to say and then act where we can and will. Yes?
Right. A lot of people in here are a little older, as I am, and so I know I kind of get stuck in old ways, traditional ways, and as you're saying, those aren't working so well. On the other hand, I'm still stuck, because I don't want to break the democracy, to save the democracy. I don't know quite how to fix the judicial system if everybody works until you get to the Supreme Court. And I'm not quite sure. A general strike is something we're looking into, maybe, and we're not quite like we're looking at all 50 states. Connecticut, they might not have anything to do with this, it's going well. The red state, they might not have anything to do with this, it's going and I do like that even among a diverse Democratic party, you're able to work together, because your highest goal is democracy, and secondly, serving your constituents. And apparently, currently, the Republicans' highest goal is to do whatever Trump says. But I would dearly love to talk to people that have other ideas and hash it out. Have me talk about where I get stuck. Have you open up some ideas and do it. I know that I don't know, maybe Senator Murphy is doing a.
Excuse me, could you speak a little louder?
Oh, sure. Senator Murphy has started a mobilizing group, or funding to do more mobilizing, so maybe we could talk to him about where his mobilizing should go, or could go. But anyway, the young people are going to be taking over. Maybe I would like to hear more. So far, what I've heard is we need action, different action, and the one idea that I've heard I'm a little skeptical about, but maybe you could convince me. Anyway, so that's what I.
The beauty is, as you say, it's in a democracy, and the way it should work is you actually get to hear those ideas.
Yeah.
And there is an opportunity to act on them as well.
And I think there are other, I mean, you have taken a lot of action, or the Democrats in general have taken a lot of action through speech, going to different occasions, even in some where some people were being arrested, trying to gather around them to keep them from being taken. So a lot of real, action, not spoken action. Maybe we could get people to put up billboards in every state. It's like, immigrants don't get, or not immigrants, only citizens get Social Security. Something there where the information actually gets out in a way. Anyway, so that's where I am.
Ms. Brock. Yes, sir, you've been patient. And we'll get back to everybody. I think it's let everybody who hasn't speak.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate it. I'm a registered independent. I don't have a particular love for the Democratic Party, but you and I have crossed paths years ago. I worked very closely with Sylvia Lee on an issue for the East Hartford Public Schools, and during that time, you earned my deep respect, which I greatly appreciate. As you can see, I also have some health issues, so I really appreciate your work on trying to make sure that healthcare is available. My wife and I do in fact get it through the exchange. We've already suffered financially, and we continue to do so for some time. I spent most of my professional career trying to help people less fortunate than myself. I was a teacher for a long time. I became a lawyer and worked with a lot of disabled veterans. And so my suffering here is not just for me and my family, it's so that I can get back to work for those individuals. And I think that, especially from a lot of the younger members of the Democratic Party, what we're missing is that, yes, we can march. You know, I marched after 9/11 in opposition to the invasion of Afghanistan, and marched in opposition to the invasion of Iraq. But at some point, and we may be near that point, it's not enough. And the only, you know, there's a lot of emotions surrounding politics right now, I think, and a lot of that is anger. But anger can't be met with anger and expect to prevail. Hate cannot be met with hate. So, but we have tools at our disposal. We can meet that anger with compassion. We can meet the hate with love. We can take care, not just of ourselves, but our Republican neighbors. And that will involve a level of suffering on our part, financially, time commitments. But it is that suffering that is the power of the movement. It's not just the words, it's not just the rallies, it's demonstrating that I'm willing to suffer, not just for me, but for you, even though we happen to share different ideas. And so, I'm sorry, this is becoming more of a statement than a question, so I apologize.
Well, you know, but that's okay. That's fine, because as you just heard, people don't come here just simply to hear what happens in a shutdown. It's America. You get to express your opinion and demand of your elected officials, well, what are you going to do about it? And, you know, and sometimes when you hear the answer, you go like, oh, well, geez, you know, it's like, but you don't want people to get frustrated. You want them to get involved. And sometimes a democracy isn't conducive to that either, which is why these rallies and hearings and everything else that goes on, I thought it was, you know, probably the most interesting exchange is I enjoyed listening to what you had to say. That's how a democracy works, is that, and if you don't say it and you keep it to yourself, you only get more frustrated. So you don't have to ever apologize for that, you know?
I appreciate it, and just sort of, you know, closing, like, I don't have the answers, right? I don't know what it looks like exactly, but I agree that sitting down and trying to hash it out is the only way moving forward. And I think, I forget who said it earlier, but it was something to the effect of, so are you saying that we are to blame? Yes, we are to blame. We allowed this to happen. You know, we didn't march in the streets or do enough when the Patriot Act passed. We didn't, you know, demand that the surveillance state be disassembled under Obama. We didn't march in the streets when he ordered the assassination of while abroad without due process. So yes, we did allow that to happen. So it is on us to reform our required sacrifice. It may require commitment beyond what we're comfortable with, but at the end of the day, we are the country. Congressman Larson does a great job at helping to facilitate, you know, making our lives easier, but at the end of the day, it is on us.
Okay. Anyone else before I'm going to go back to, yes, ma'am. And then,
Building consensus, like you start with things everyone agrees with. No matter you're a Democrat or a Republican, you must have a list of 50 things that everyone would agree should get done. Is there any way to kind of bring those to the front and start with that? Then you could say, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did it in our bipartisan ways.
popular belief, a lot of things still do happen bipartisanly in Congress, but they're not newsworthy.
And we gotta tell our
You
reporters,
know, so
report on that.
because that doesn't create interest or controversy. And that's a generalization on my part as well, but I want you to know that that happens all the time. The framework that was laid out by our forefathers still, you know, exists for the democracy to function in an appropriate way. And you heard me talk at the start of this about the cloture vote. Most people don't even know what That is. And not that they should, but that is an important factor in, why things can't get done or get blocked or why things happen. And so it's something, and again, both of our United States senators are opposed to that. So, but that's probably not known to most people either. So I get your point. It is, you want to hear about the things that are, usually most people say, I'm fed up with both parties. I'm fed up with the process. I just want to see people working together to get something done for the country. And ideally, yes, there's a reason it says toward a more perfect union. We're far from a perfect union. We were founded by people who held slaves, and women couldn't vote, just for starters. So, it is always evolving, we hope, toward a more perfect union. And the way you get there is slow and arduous and back and forth, give and take. And especially in a day and age where things happen like that. And now, I said that the Common Sense was the most well-read document in the colonies, and Washington credited that with changing the Continental Congress. And believe it or not, there was no radio, television, telephones, or anything to communicate other than people communicating with people. And yet, that happened. So, to your point before, we can never lose. It was someone talking to their representatives, having read Common Sense and saying, you know what? I'm not for reconciliation with the king. And that's where Congress was headed. Because the business communities, the ports were all closed down. People were feeling the constraints of the British Army. And Washington feared that the Continental Army would dissolve and that Congress was going to reconcile. And he wondered for his troops, and I'm sure for himself, what was going to happen in that process. But the people changed the course of history. And so there is a reason why it starts, we the people. Because that's what it's going to take. Not that your elected representatives shouldn't be held accountable and called, but also elected representatives need to get out and hear and listen what people have to say and take it in. Can you accomplish all of it? Probably not. But can you take it all in and get parts and pieces and continue to move toward a more perfect nation? Absolutely. And then future generations will come in and take it even further. It will be a struggle. It's not easy. People have different points of view and come from different philosophical bases. And Connecticut isn't necessarily like Iowa. And you're going to find different people with different points of view, etc. And yet they're all part of these United States. And they have the same voice that you do. And in a small state, we're fortunate that we have a pretty strong voice because of the positions that people have been able to hold. To have Rosa DeLauro at the point of the spear arguing on behalf of all Democrats, and when we take back, and I thoroughly believe we will take back the majority, she'll be chair of the Appropriations Committee. In the history of the country, Connecticut has never had a chair of that committee. Those things matter Two, if you're going to create change, and I believe they will. Okay, anyone else who hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet, then we'll go. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. You haven't asked a question, sir.
Yeah, so I worry a lot that we're counting on the next election to solve our problems, because first of all, whether, like that young man said, whether the next election is going to be fair or not is debatable, very debatable, because they're working very hard to make sure it isn't, right? But even if it is, what makes us think that if we control the Congress and get a budget and you can pass it, that Donald Trump will just say, by the way, we're not giving that money that you allocated to someone, we're giving it to somebody else, and the Supreme Court is allowing them to do that. So the process is not going to work, so we need to do something different. I think it's already broken, right, as he said, and we have to try to figure out what are we going to do if that happens. It's happening now.
So what you're saying is, system is already broken and it doesn't work, so we're going to replace that with another system. What system is that, and who is going to vote for that, and how are you going to lay that out and put it before the American people? It sounds good. Now, talk about action. Show me the actionable steps that that's going to take and how it will take place in 50 states and in the way that our system operates at the federal, state, and local level. Tip O'Neill famously said, all politics is local, meaning that if you pursue change, it's usually done from the bottom up, and that's how movements start that are most effective. So they start, you could argue, in the states, or in the state legislature, or in the community of West Hartford. And they start with movements and people and ideas. But I don't think you can, even though it clearly isn't functioning the way that we'd like, and there are these fears out here that Trump will somehow influence the next election or will be up for a third term, or whatever the case may be. He's a master at distraction and getting people's attention, and that creates fear. And he bases his leadership on division and fear. And what counteracts that is hope and unity and coming together. How do you do that? You vote. How do you make sure that people vote overwhelmingly instead of just barely getting by? Look how close Congress is divided in both the House and Senate. Contrary to popular belief, Democrats in the House picked up seats in the last election. We didn't lose seats, but we didn't win enough. The effort wasn't there to take control and be an absolute check on the President of the United States. Yes, ma'am.
I want to know what's happening with the Epstein files, because...
Well, that's why we've asked that our newest member be sworn in immediately, and I don't think they took us up on that, but she will be sworn in next week. So then that will be the signature that is needed to bring the Epstein files forward. But listen, I'll say this about that. You know, they should have been brought forward, but should have been brought forward under Democrats too. We can't deny the fact that there was an opportunity for us to bring them forward as well. And let the cards fall where they shall. But I wouldn't, anything they're going to say about Donald Trump, and everyone saying, oh, Trump doesn't, I'm sure he doesn't. But is it going to change anyone's opinion or mind of Donald Trump? I know. Forgive my skepticism there, but I don't think so. Well, this gentleman has been waiting a while, then I will get to you too.
Somewhere where I'm really struggling is that, let's say, we look at Zoran Mondale in New York, where he clearly has the mandate of the people. Like, Zoran is winning overwhelmingly across every single voter market. He's winning even Republicans. Like, he's winning Staten Island, which is famously so conservative, as someone who is an open socialist, an open progressive, and yet Schumer, Jeffries have refused to endorse him. It took Kathy Hochul months to endorse Zoran, even though he has the clear will of the people of New York City. He is putting forward actual actionable policies addressing rent control, addressing social safety nets, actual policies that aren't even socialist in nature. Like, these are things that have been done before in New York City politics, and yet we are seeing more moderate centrist Democrats refusing to support Zoran, refusing to give him their endorsements, even though he has the nomination of the Democratic Party in New York City. And we're seeing this sort of play of what happened with Bernie back in 2016 and 2020, where the establishment party went against Bernie and completely took him down and wasn't able to, and didn't allow him to succeed. So how can we trust that when, if we're going to rely on elections, if we're going to rely on the electoral processes, when young progressives come forth with actual policies, with policies that work, that are backed by data, that are backed by science, that the people overwhelmingly want and love and support, and yet the more moderate wing, the more centrist wing, refuses to support that. How can we sort of why should we trust that the establishment of the Democratic Party is going to make that room? It seems that they just want to hold on to the power that they already have. Like Chris Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo is not giving up, even though he lost. He clearly doesn't know how to say anything, he clearly doesn't know what consent is, right? Andrew Cuomo is not letting in. So, I struggle with putting faith in the Democratic establishment and the Democratic Party if it's not even going to support its own nominees just because it thinks that they're too far left, when they are presenting very logical policies that are, they're enacted in Europe. Mondale, even though he is a so-called socialist, none of his policies are genuinely socialist in nature. They are things that have been done in America before. I think he is in charge of it, but obviously, you can't go in there spewing. I don't want to focus on that specifically, but what I'm saying is, why should we put that trust in the establishment if the establishment is not going to back up people who clearly have the will of the people and are going to actively work against them? Democratic elites are pushing to get Mondale out of the race and are backing Andrew Cuomo, despite how truly corrupt he is, how disgraced he is as a governor for all the scandals and corruption that he engaged in.
I don't think Andrew Cuomo has a chance.
I don't think so either. No, I don't believe so. What I'm saying is that
it's too broad
Jefferson and Schumer still have a
generalization, I think, to say that all Democrats and Democrats don't support him. I think that he's made his case. He's taken his case to the people, and what will happen that will change all of that?
I understand that. I do understand that. My point is
who gets to vote in that
Jefferson and
election?
Schumer being the leaders of the Democratic Party, but not endorsing him, even though they're both from New York.
But what difference did it make? He won.
He did, but why is the party supporting him? It's the symbolism of the party actually supporting someone new who is actually
I can't speak for Schumer.
No, I understand that.
But here's the deal. He's a vote if he's in New York City. He's not going to make the difference one way or the other. And so I think the process worked. The process worked because you had someone, you just rattled through a list of things that he presented to the people of New York. And what did the people do? They voted for him. And they voted for him based on what he put forward. And isn't that the way the system's supposed to work?
True, I just fear the establishment working against more progressives like that as they rise up across the nation.
Well, it's always been the case throughout history that you're always going to have conservatives, moderates, liberals, and ultimately the best ideas will prevail. you know, and it's, you can't really expect that everyone's gonna change just overnight, no matter how logical the policies may seem or feel. But it works. And he's exhibit A of why it does. Yes, sir, you had your hand up too.
Honestly, I don't think I can contribute anything to use to this conversation, and I personally believe that you just go ahead and move into concrete solutions or solutions on the way forward.
Okay. Well, yes, ma'am? Yes, ma'am.
Just very quickly, can you clarify, we keep talking about the midterm elections, these cuts will not take effect until after the elections. Is that correct?
Some of them. Not all of them, but what happens in the overall cuts to Medicare and Medicaid will transpire after 2026.
So the people
But
that
leading
it's
up to a lot of people will not know. And a lot of others, a lot of the Republicans are campaigning. Trump convinced them that, hey, look, vote for this. It's not going to take effect until after the election. And trust me, I'm going to convince the American people that this, and I have a great electoral reputation. And so he's going to go out there and try to spread these mistruths.
So Congressman, that they're actually not going to feel it in their pocketbook before the election. That's my point. It's going to take effect.
Some will, some won't. So it's a mixed bag. But yes, to your point, it does take complete effect afterwards. And then a lot of it too will run over a span of a decade. Irrespective, it was the wrong policy.
Right.
So.
Right, I agree with that, but I'm just saying for the people that are saying, oh, it's not so bad. You know,
Well, and that's what Trump wants them to say.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Trump keeps on ruling by executive order and takes advantage of the slowness of the courts. So my whole thing is you know, our democracy is being hijacked by that strategy. And I'm wondering if there's something that policy-wise that we can do to sort of combat that. Because I don't think that president should be able to rule by executive order. There's got to be some constraints to that, and also some way we can compel the courts to move faster.
Well, our Attorney General has done a pretty good job so far, winning at least 3 or 4 cases. So we do have the court system that we can go to, and there's broad skepticism there too.
So the speed of it is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, exactly. Well, the speed isn't, you know, part of a democratic process.
I'm wondering if there's something that can be done. I guess, yeah, because there's 3 branches of government. I just, in our system, somehow, we're sort of alluding to some way of correcting our government so that we can correct all the crap that's going on. And I'm just trying to put that out there. Maybe there's something that can be done on those things.
Again, it gets back to the general frustration I think that people feel, but 2 years is not actually a long time when you think about it. It's a very long time if you happen to be implicated or hurt by policies that are happening. So, but what's the trigger? And there are triggers. You could have a revolution. But do you think that's going to happen? And then there's probably more of an evolution, I think, where people are saying, okay, well, am I going to step up and do something about that? As the gentleman said, what's my responsibility? And I think once people look at that, and then they start to say, hey, well, maybe if we sit down and listen to one another and we agree, we can move forward together in a way that we feel confident that once we get the results that we want, that we're going to have elected the people that will put that in place. But there is no easy, readable.
Well, I didn't think it would be easy, but because I think that we need to really come together whenever that can happen, to come up with different ways of handling, critical issues that are going way too slow.
Well,
And that's a general
a
statement.
lot of people and a majority of Democrats would agree with you, including Jasmine Crockett, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Bernie Sanders. Go down the list, and there's a multitude of people who believe that, and they're very vocal, and they're out there, and working hard daily to make that change. And they're part of the system. Yes?
Hi, thank you for being here and providing this forum for us. I don't know if this is the right place to do this, but we are talking about health issues. I recently read that, I live in a state where women still have some protection about their own personal health issues, and I'm very grateful for that. But I recently read that Costco is no longer going to provide abortion, their pharmacies are no longer going to provide the abortion medications. That alarms me. I mean, Costco is a national supplier of pharmaceuticals. Also, I read that California is now, as a state, is providing insulin to their citizens. I'm wondering, can Connecticut do that too?
Yes, good.
I'd like to see that happen.
Well, the General Assembly and the governor would have to vote on that, but just like Connecticut, when I was Senate President of the state of Connecticut, we were the first state in the nation to codify Roe versus Wade. We were the first state in the nation to introduce family and medical leave. That was a few years ago.
When I first started working for the health department for the state of Connecticut, I was a young teenager, and at that time, if I had gotten pregnant, I couldn't get medical coverage for a baby because I wasn't married. So, yeah, I've seen a lot of progress in Connecticut. But I'm talking about pharmaceuticals. How are we going to deal with these pharmaceutical changes that are actually going to affect us personally, that have nothing to do with state legislation? And I would love to, if you could tell me to talk about getting insulin produced for the people, by the people in the state of Connecticut, I would love to know who to talk to. I'd like to see that happen.
Well, where do you live?
I live in Brookfield.
All right, so I'm trying to think who your state senator or state representative would be.
Bobby Gibson.
Bobby Gibson or whomever. I would say to them, this is what you wanted in terms of legislation, but insulin now at the federal level is down to, we dropped that to $35.
Yeah.
So, and the government can now what follows through on it with these agencies, the government can now negotiate directly with the pharmaceutical companies, because the government is a far larger entity to drive down costs. And we'll continue to do that, and that remains the primary goal, to continue to lower the cost of prescription drugs.
Well, I'd like to see that.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
I'm a biologist. I think a lot of the root change of people having to leave where they live is climate change. And the more we drill, baby drill, and we burn fossil fuels, the more people are going to try to go to the vanishingly fewer number of places where it's still possible to grow food and live comfortably. Is that a tack that can be taken to say, wait a minute, it's not, just something about fuel, it's something about this huge immigration problem that you're worried about in the world, and part of the solution is to take care of the environment better. And a lot of Trump's initiatives to burn as many fossil fuels as possible are doing exactly the opposite of
Yeah. Well, you're right.
that. So go for it. Thank you.
We have. But, you know, and there's a lot of concern about what his abuses of executive authority, and we have to continue to check those. And there is a system in place to check them. And, but you can tell, even here today, there's quite a bit of skepticism as to whether or not that system is working the way you want it to work. And if it's not, then what do you do to change that? Well, I'm saying it's an electoral process. And then people are saying, yes, but even that's not a guarantee that things won't change and that things are going to continue. I say, well, then what is the other process? And you could, I mean, totally change the government. You could. I think that sounds good. I think that sounds good. But that's a lot of effort and work to make sure that, you know, do you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, as the saying goes? Certainly, you want to see Trump follow the law instead of disregard the law. Well, what's going to change that? His no longer being in office or the ability to check what he does. And if the current system is where they control the House and the Senate, doesn't it make sense to have a body that will check him? Agree, disagree, or not, that is how the system works, and that's a way for us to check him. And I think most Americans, as frustrated as they are, would say, yeah, okay, that's probably the best system, because even if you want to change the way things are in a democracy, you're still going to have to go through quite a process to make that happen.
I'm not advocating revolution.
Well, no, I'm not saying you are, but I'm not saying you are, but I'm just saying that and revolutions don't have to be violent revolutions, or change can happen, but the change usually happens because people raise an issue and stay with it till they get there, till they spread the democratic intent of it. And it has to spread not only here in a single state, but through 50 states. And even with all that, it's still a pretty good system. Well, I apologize that I have to be at another event, but actually, thank you for coming out and enjoy the opportunity.